How long have you been waiting for the right time? Waiting for the market to shift. Waiting for the kids to get older. Waiting for the bank account to feel safe enough. The schedule to feel light enough. The fear to feel small enough. I need you to hear this clearly, because most people won't tell you the truth this plainly. That day is not coming. There is no future Tuesday where the conditions finally line up. Discipline suddenly becomes easy, and the path lights itself up in front of you. You are waiting for a season that does not exist on any calendar. And here's the part that stings a little. Good, let it sting. A little sting today beats a lifetime of regret later. It was never the conditions. It's not the economy. It's not your boss. It's not the year you were born, the family you were raised in, or the luck you did or didn't get. Those things are real. I'm not going to stand here and tell you circumstances don't exist. They do. Some people start closer to the mountain than others. That's true, and it isn't fair, and it also isn't the point. Because two people can be handed the exact same circumstance, the same field, the same soil, the same sky overhead, and one of them walks away with a harvest, and the other walks away with a long list of very reasonable explanations for why it couldn't be done. Same field, different outcome. So if it isn't the field, what is it? It's the farmer. It's you. It's what you believe about effort and time and yourself, running quietly underneath every decision you make. Some people call that a mindset. I call it something deeper. I call it your philosophy. And right now, whether you've ever said that word out loud or not, you already have one. You built it. One small excuse, one skipped morning, one "I'll start Monday" at a time. Or you built it from discipline, one hard choice at a time. Either way, you built it. Nobody handed it to you. So here is the real question underneath all the others. Are you the architect of your own life? Or are you just living in whatever got built by accident while you weren't paying attention? Because right now, today, you are either constructing something on purpose, brick by brick, or you are living in a house circumstance built for you, wondering why the rooms feel so small. Stay with me for the next 50 minutes. I'm not here to hand you a hack, a slogan, or a 5-minute trick that fixes nothing. I'm here to hand you a philosophy, the same kind that turns ordinary people, with ordinary starts, into people who look back on their life one day and don't recognize the frightened, waiting version of themselves anymore. Let's build that person. Starting now. Let's talk about the gap. Not the gap between rich and poor. Not the gap between lucky and unlucky. I mean the gap between the life you're living and the life you're capable of living. Because that gap has a name, and the name is not talent, and it is not opportunity. It's philosophy. Here's what I mean by that word, because I don't want you to hear it as something abstract. Your philosophy is simply this: the story you tell yourself about why things are the way they are. Ask a person why they haven't started the business, why they haven't left the job that's draining them, why they haven't picked up the book instead of the remote, and listen closely to the answer. Because buried inside that answer is their entire philosophy of life. I don't have time. I'm waiting for the right moment. It's just not in the cards for someone like me. Every one of those sentences is a philosophy. And every philosophy produces a harvest, whether you planted it on purpose or not. Here's the trap. Most people are living by a philosophy they never actually chose. They inherited it. From a tired parent who said, "We don't do things like that." From one disappointing year that quietly got generalized into a life sentence. From a culture that rewards comfort and, without ever announcing it, punishes ambition by making it look exhausting. Nobody sat you down and said, "Here is a philosophy. Choose it deliberately and build your whole life on top of it." It just accumulated, quietly, like dust on a shelf you stopped looking at. And one day, you woke up and realized the shelf was your whole life. Now here's the contrast I want you to hold in your mind for the rest of this. Because everything I teach you today runs through this one filter. There is a wishing philosophy, and there is a becoming philosophy. The wishing philosophy says, I wish things were easier. I wish I had more time, more money, a better boss, a different childhood, a shortcut. The wishing philosophy spends all of its energy negotiating with reality instead of working on itself. The becoming philosophy says something completely different. It says, I may not be able to change the field, but I can change the farmer. I can wake up tomorrow slightly wiser, slightly stronger, slightly more disciplined than I am today. Not because the conditions changed, but because I did. Do you see the difference? Wishing looks outward and asks the world to be different. Becoming looks inward and asks the person to be different. One of those philosophies is available to you regardless of your bank account, your zip code, your age, or your past. The other one keeps you waiting for a permission slip that is never going to arrive. Let me put it as plainly as I can, because plain language changes lives faster than clever language ever does. If you keep wishing it were easier, you will stay exactly where you are, becoming an expert at explaining why. If you start working on becoming better, the exact same circumstances will start producing a completely different result, because the farmer changed, not the field. I want to be fair to you here, because this is not about shame. This is not me standing up here calling you lazy or broken. Most people with a wishing philosophy aren't lazy. They're untrained. Nobody taught them the alternative. Nobody sat them down and explained that philosophy is a skill, that you can study it, sharpen it, and rebuild it, the same way you'd rebuild a body at the gym. That's exactly what we're doing for the rest of this. Rebuilding the philosophy, one plank at a time. So before we go further, I need you to be honest about something. Just with yourself, just for a second. Which philosophy have you actually been living by this year? The wishing one or the becoming one? Don't answer too fast. Look at your calendar. Look at your habits. Look at what you did yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that. Your calendar doesn't lie, even when you do. Whatever the honest answer is, good. Awareness is the first rung on the ladder, and you cannot climb a ladder you refuse to look at. So let's build the first plank of this new philosophy, and it starts on a farm. Picture an actual field, dirt under your fingernails. A single season stretched out in front of you, spring, summer, fall, winter, and one law running underneath the entire year, a law that has never once been broken in the history of the world. You reap what you sow, not what you meant to sow, not what you planned to sow eventually, what you actually, physically put in the ground. Simple, right? Almost too simple to bother saying out loud. But here's what people forget about that law. The part that actually changes how you live once you understand it. You reap after you sow. Never before. There is no farmer in the history of agriculture who has planted a seed on Monday and harvested a crop on Tuesday. The ground does not negotiate. The seed does not rush. Between the sowing and the reaping, there is always a season where nothing visible seems to be happening at all. And that season, the quiet, invisible, nothing seems to be working season, is exactly where most people quit. They plant the seed. They water it for 4 days. They check the ground on day 5, see no sprout, and decide the whole method must be wrong. So they dig the seed back up to inspect it, which of course kills it, and then they wonder why nothing ever grows for them. Let me ask you honestly, how many seeds have you dug up early in your own life? The workout plan you gave 6 days before quitting. The idea you shelved because month 1 didn't pay the bills. The relationship, the skill, the habit you abandoned right before the roots were about to take hold. Here's the part nobody warns you about. The season between planting and harvest is not a malfunction. It is the process working exactly as designed. The invisible part is not empty. It's underground. Roots don't announce themselves. They just grow, quietly, in the dark, doing the work that will eventually hold up everything you can see above the soil. So here is your first contrast, and I want it to sit with you. If you sow discipline in private, you will eventually reap results in public. If you sow excuses in private, you will eventually reap a life you have to keep explaining to people. Either way, you reap. The field doesn't skip anyone. It doesn't check your resume, your intentions, or how badly you wanted a different outcome. It simply returns whatever you planted. Multiplied. That word matters. Multiplied. Because this law isn't, you get out exactly what you put in, like some kind of even trade. Farming has never worked that way. You plant one kernel of corn, and if the season is honored, you don't get one kernel back. You get an entire stalk, covered in hundreds of kernels. The field doesn't return your investment. It multiplies it. That cuts both ways. And I need you to sit with the uncomfortable half of this truth too. Small neglects multiply, just as generously as small disciplines do. A missed workout doesn't cost you one day of fitness. Ignored long enough, it costs you a decade of it. A single skip chance to learn doesn't cost you one skill. It costs you every version of your future that skill would have opened the door to. The field is not cruel. It is simply honest. Painfully, perfectly honest. So let me bring this back to you. Standing right where you are today, in whatever season of life you're currently in. What have you been sowing? Not what you meant to sow. Not what you plan to sow eventually. What have your actual daily actions, the ones nobody was watching, been planting into the field of your life? Because here is the good news buried inside this hard law. The field does not care about your past harvests. It doesn't hold last year's failed crop against you with any bitterness. Every single morning, the field is willing to receive new seed. That means today, this exact day you're living through right now, is a fresh row of untouched soil. It doesn't matter what you planted yesterday, or last year, or for the last 10 years. The field doesn't hold a grudge. It only asks one question every single day. What are you planting today? Answer that question with your actions, not your intentions, and you have already begun changing your harvest. Now let's talk about the second plank, because this is the one most people quietly avoid, even though it might be the most important truth in this entire video. Every single choice you make in life carries a price. There is no version of your future that is free. The only real decision you get to make is which price you're willing to pay. And when it comes to growth, there are only ever two prices on the table. Learn to see them clearly, and you will never look at a hard choice the same way again. The first price is the pain of discipline. It shows up small. It shows up early. It shows up as the alarm you don't want to hear, the workout you don't want to start, the conversation you don't want to have, the budget you don't want to follow. Discipline's pain is honest about its size. It tells you exactly what it's going to cost, up front, and then it delivers exactly that, nothing more. The second price is the pain of regret. It shows up late. It shows up big. It shows up as the body you wish you'd taken care of 10 years ago, the relationship you wish you'd repaired before it was too late, the years you wish you hadn't spent waiting for a feeling of readiness that was never going to arrive on its own. Regret's pain lies about its size at first. It whispers that skipping today costs nothing. And then, years later, it presents the real invoice, with interest. Here is the plainest way I can say this to you. Discipline costs you a small, honest amount today. Refuse to pay it, and regret doesn't forget the debt. It lets the balance sit quietly, gathering weight, until it finally calls the whole amount due at once. Usually on the exact day you have the least strength left to answer for it. So understand, you are not choosing between pain and no pain. That option was never on the table, and anyone selling it to you is selling you a lie. You are choosing between a small pain now, or a much larger pain later. Between them, not instead of them. I want to say something else, because most people think of discipline as punishment, as restriction. Doesn't start with sweeping changes or grand gestures, but with small, deliberate actions repeated each day. That's backwards. Discipline is not the enemy of freedom. Discipline is the architecture of freedom. The disciplined person who wakes up early, trains their body, protects their time, and studies their craft isn't in a cage. They're building a bridge. And every plank they nail into that bridge is one more section of solid ground between where they are now and where they actually want to stand. So let's say it the way it needs to be said, and I want you to actually hear this, not just read past it. Discipline is the bridge between who you are and who you're capable of becoming. Discipline is the choice you make when nobody is watching, and no one would ever know if you skipped it. Discipline is the price, not the punishment, the price. And every worthwhile life has one. Here's your contrast for this section, and it's the sharpest one yet. If you pay the price of discipline today, you get to choose your future. If you refuse the price of discipline today, your future gets chosen for you. By regret, by default, by drift. Let me ask you something honestly, the way a mentor asks a student they actually care about. Which pain have you been unconsciously choosing? The small one, paid daily, on purpose? Or the large one, quietly accumulating interest, waiting for a due date you are not going to enjoy? Most people don't choose regret on purpose. Nobody wakes up and says, "Today I will build a life I'll regret." It happens through 1,000 small non-choices. 1,000, "I'll start Mondays." 1,000 times the snooze button won the argument instead of the vision. But here's the mercy hidden inside this hard truth. If regret is built out of small non-choices, then discipline can be rebuilt the exact same way. One small choice, repeated on purpose, starting today. You don't need a dramatic reinvention. You need one honest choice, made deliberately, today. And then again tomorrow. That was always the whole secret. It was never complicated. It was only uncomfortable, and comfort was never the goal. Becoming was. Now I want to give you a lens that will change how you see every hard year of your life, not just the good ones. I want to talk to you about seasons. Because here is a mistake almost everyone makes at some point, usually during the hardest year of their life. They mistake a season for a sentence. Let me explain what I mean. A field does not produce a harvest in every season. In spring, the farmer prepares the ground, clearing it, breaking it up, getting it ready for seed. Nothing is growing yet. It would be easy to stand in a spring field and think nothing is happening here. But everything is happening. The ground is being made ready for everything that comes after. In summer, the seed is planted, and the real, unglamorous work begins. Watering, weeding, tending, watching for pests, showing up on the days when nothing visible seems to be changing. This is the season most people quit in, because summer asks for the most effort while offering the least visible reward. In fall, the harvest finally arrives. This is the season everyone wants. This is the season people picture when they picture success. Full baskets, visible reward, the payoff for everything invisible that came before. And then there's winter. Winter is cold. Winter is bare. Winter looks, to an untrained eye, like death. The field is empty. Nothing is growing. It would be easy to stand in a winter field and conclude the whole project has failed. But any real farmer will tell you the truth about winter. It is not the end of the field. It is the season the field rests. And, this part matters most, it is the season the roots of everything perennial grow deepest, precisely because nothing above the surface is distracting them. Here is why I'm telling you all of this. You are currently living in one of these 4 seasons. Maybe it's spring. You're clearing ground, starting fresh, and it feels like nothing is happening yet. Maybe it's summer. You're doing the unglamorous daily work, and the harvest hasn't arrived to reward you for it yet. Maybe you're in fall, finally reaping something you planted long ago. Or maybe, and this is the season most people are quietly living through when they find videos like this one, you're in winter, cold, bare, wondering if the whole field is finished. I need you to hear this clearly. Winter is not a verdict on your life. It is a season inside your life. And seasons, by their very nature, change. The mistake, the one that quietly ruins more lives than bad luck ever does, is looking at a winter season and calling it a destination. Deciding that because it's cold right now, it will always be cold. That because the field is bare today, it is barren forever. A season is not your identity. A season is weather, not geography. And weather always moves. Here's your contrast for this part of the lesson. If you treat winter as a destination, you build a permanent identity out of a temporary condition. You start calling yourself a failure instead of a person currently in a hard season. And that single word swap convinces you to stop doing the very things that would move you into spring. If you treat winter as a season, you keep doing the quiet root work even when nothing above ground shows it. Because you understand that the coldest months are often the exact months building the strength spring is going to need. Let me ask you plainly, what season are you currently calling a life sentence? The job loss, the failed launch, the relationship that ended, the health scare, the year that knocked the wind out of you. Is that actually a permanent verdict on who you are? Or is it winter? Cold, uncomfortable, honest, and like every winter before it in the history of the world, temporary. Because here's the part I most want you to take from this section. Failure was never meant to be your final chapter. It was only ever meant to be a season. The people who go on to build extraordinary lives are not the people who skipped winter. There's no such person. Every single one of them walked through a bare, cold field at some point and made a decision most people don't make. They kept tending roots nobody else could see, and they trusted a spring they could not yet prove was coming. There's one more plank we need before we start building anything with our hands. And it might be the quietest, most underestimated force in this entire philosophy. Compounding. Here's the trap almost everyone falls into. We expect growth to look like a straight line. Effort goes in, a roughly equal reward comes out, in a nice, even, predictable slope. So people try discipline for 2 weeks, look at the results, see barely anything different, and conclude the whole approach doesn't work for them. But growth was never a straight line. It's a curve. And for a long, unglamorous stretch at the beginning of that curve, it looks almost exactly like nothing is happening at all. Picture a single small decision, one that, on its own, looks almost too small to matter. Reading 10 pages instead of scrolling for 10 minutes. Choosing the walk over the elevator. Choosing the honest conversation over the comfortable silence. On day one, that decision changes almost nothing you can measure. On day one, the disciplined path and the undisciplined path look nearly identical. That's exactly the trap. Because it was never day one that separates two lives. It's day 1000. Small disciplines don't add up. They multiply. Compound the smallest positive choice, day after day, and eventually the curve bends upward so sharply it looks, from the outside, like luck or talent or an overnight transformation. It was never overnight. It was only invisible for long enough that nobody was watching when the real work happened. And here's the part that should genuinely concern you, in the most useful possible way. This exact same law compounds in the other direction, just as generously. Small neglects don't add up either. They multiply too. One skipped morning doesn't cost you a morning. It costs you the version of you that 100 disciplined mornings would have built. One dismissed hard conversation doesn't cost you one conversation. It costs you the version of the relationship that honesty could have protected. This is why people can wake up at 40, feeling like a stranger dropped them into their own life. Nothing dramatic happened. It was never one bad decision. It was 10,000 small ones, quietly compounding in a direction nobody was watching. So let me give you the contrast, and I want this one to really land, because it's the engine behind almost everything else in this video. If you compound small disciplines, you don't just improve, you eventually become a different order of person than the one who started. The gap between you and your old self stops being a percentage and starts being a category. If you compound small neglects, the same thing happens in reverse. You don't just fall a little behind. You wake up one day in a completely different life than the one you were capable of, wondering where the years went. When the honest answer is, they went exactly where you quietly pointed them. one unremarkable day at a time. This is why I need you to stop asking the question most people ask, which is, will this one action really make a difference? Asked about a single action, in isolation, the honest answer is almost always no. One page, one workout, one kind word, one skipped snack. Judged alone, none of it matters much at all. But you are never going to take that action alone. You're going to take it as the first domino in a chain that runs for years. And dominoes don't ask permission to compound. They just do it, automatically, as a law of physics, the moment you tip the first one. So the real question was never, does this one action matter? The real question is, which direction have you been quietly compounding in? And are you willing to tip the first domino in a new direction, starting today? Even though today's single domino will look, all by itself, like it changed almost nothing at all. There's one more part of this field nobody talks about enough, and it might be shaping your harvest more than anything else we've covered so far. What's growing in the field right next to yours? No crop grows in isolation. Ask any farmer, and they'll tell you a field doesn't just receive sun and rain, it receives whatever grows in the fields around it too. Weeds cross a fence line, so does good soil, carried on the wind, one season at a time. The same is true for you. You don't grow in isolation either. You are, right now, absorbing the philosophy of every person you spend real time with. Their standards, their excuses, their appetite for growth, or their tolerance for staying stuck. Whether you've ever noticed it happening or not. This is not about cutting people out of your life like they're disposable. People are not crops to be weeded without a second thought. And I am not here to teach you to treat them that way. This is about honesty. Plain honesty about what's actually growing next to you. Ask yourself something simple. When you talk about your goals around the people closest to you, what grows? Does it get watered? Or does it quietly get stepped on? One joke, one eye roll, one why bother at a time. Here's the contrast. If you spend your days near people who treat discipline as a normal, expected part of life, discipline starts to feel unremarkable to you too. Just what people do. If you spend your days near people who treat ambition like showing off, or hard work like something to be quietly mocked, you will absorb that philosophy whether you meant to or not, the same way a field absorbs whatever blows in over the fence line. You rarely rise above the standard of the field around you without noticing it and choosing something different, on purpose. I think about this every time I hear someone say, I don't know why I keep ending up back where I started. Almost every time, when you look closely, the field around them never changed. Same conversations, same limiting assumptions, repeated back so often they started to sound like facts. This is why two people can read the exact same book, hear the exact same lesson, and walk away with completely different harvests 5 years later. It was never really about the book. It was about which field they went home to that night, and what got watered there, and what got stepped on. I'm not telling you this so you can go blame your family, your friends, or your circumstances for where you are. We already covered that trap at the very beginning of this. I'm telling you this because it's the one honest exception to something I said earlier, that circumstances don't write your story. Here's the nuance. Circumstances don't write your story, but your response to your circumstances includes choosing, deliberately, which field you plant your goals in. That part actually is within your control, even when the people themselves are not. So here's a quiet discipline to add to the list, without any drama. Notice who waters your seeds, and who steps on them. Spend a little more time near the people who make discipline look normal. Bring your goals to the people who ask good questions about them, instead of the people who need you to stay exactly where you are, so they feel comfortable staying exactly where they are too. You don't need a new crowd overnight. You need honest awareness of the one you already have, and the quiet courage to keep planting your best seeds anyway. Because disciplined people carry a strange, quiet gravity. Given enough time, they don't just survive their field. They start to shape it. So let's stop talking about the field for a moment, and let's get our hands in the dirt. Philosophy without action is just an interesting conversation, and I didn't bring you this far for an interesting conversation. I'm going to give you a small handful of disciplines. Not 50, not a productivity system with 40 tabs open. A small handful. Because the whole point of everything we just covered is that small, repeated, and real beats big, occasional, and abandoned. Every single time. And every one of these I want you doing today. Not next Monday. Not once the right season arrives. Because we already established that season doesn't exist on a calendar. Today. Here is the first discipline. Write the harvest down. Not in your head. On paper, or in a note on your phone. But somewhere real. Write down, in 1 or 2 sentences, exactly what field you're trying to grow. Not a vague wish like, I want to be successful. A specific harvest. I want to build a business that replaces my income within 2 years. I want to be strong enough to keep up with my kids without stopping to catch my breath. Whatever it is for you, name it specifically, today. A seed you can't name is a seed you'll forget to plant. Here is the second discipline. Choose one honest action. Remember, discipline costs a small amount. Paid daily. Regret waits and collects a much larger amount. All at once. So don't try to pay the whole debt off today. Choose one single, specific, slightly uncomfortable action connected to the harvest you just named, and do it before you sleep tonight. 10 pages of a book in your field. 1 outreach message you've been avoiding. 1 walk. 1 honest conversation. 1 deliberate action, done on purpose today, is worth more than a perfect plan you never start. Here is the third discipline. Protect 30 minutes of self-education. Not scrolling. Not passive noise in the background while you do something else. 30 focused minutes, where you are actively becoming someone more valuable than you were this morning. A book, a course, a skill directly tied to the harvest you named in step 1. Nobody handed you a class on this. What you learn on your own, deliberately, after the lessons other people gave you have run out, that is the education that actually compounds. Do this today, and again tomorrow, and let it become the one appointment with yourself you never cancel. Here is the fourth discipline. Have the conversation you've been avoiding. Almost everyone hearing this has one conversation sitting quietly in the back of their mind. A boundary you haven't set. An apology you haven't given. A request you haven't made because you're afraid of the answer. Regret is disproportionately built out of unspoken sentences. You don't need to have the whole conversation today. You need to say the first honest sentence of it today, out loud, to the actual person, not just rehearsed in your head for the 100th time. Here is the fifth discipline. Take care of the one place you actually live. Not your house, your body. 10 minutes of movement. A glass of water instead of the third coffee. Standing up and stretching instead of sitting through the ache. You can replace almost anything else in life. A job, a house, even a fortune, if it comes to that. You cannot replace this body. Treat it today like the one non-negotiable asset it actually is. Here is the sixth discipline. Sit near better soil, on purpose. Send one message today to someone whose standards make you want to rise, not shrink. Ask them one honest question about how they built what they built. You don't need to overhaul your whole circle by tonight. You only need to prove to yourself that you're willing to plant near better ground, starting with a single conversation. Notice something about every discipline I just gave you. None of them require 5 years. None of them require permission, capital, luck, or the right season. Every single one is available to you in the next 24 hours, regardless of your bank account, your job title, or the family you were born into. That's not an accident. That's the entire philosophy, in practice. The wishing philosophy waits for the big, dramatic someday action. The becoming philosophy takes the small, unremarkable, available right now action, and trusts the field to do what fields have always done, with honest seed. So here's your assignment, plainly stated, no metaphor required. Before you sleep tonight, do at least 3 of those 6 things. Name the harvest. Choose your action. Protect your 30 minutes. Say the sentence. Move the body. Send the message. Not because any one of them will transform your life by tomorrow morning. It won't. And if someone promises you it will, they're selling you something. Do it because tomorrow is where day 2 of the compound starts, and day 2 only exists if day 1 actually happened. Now let me show you something. Close your eyes if you're just listening to this, or if you're watching. Let the picture form anyway, because I want you to actually see this, not just hear it. Look 5 years down the road, not vaguely, specifically. 2 versions of you are standing at the same point on the calendar. Same starting age today, same starting circumstances today, same amount of time available, because that part never changes for anyone. Rich or poor, 5 years is 5 years. Roughly 1,800 mornings. No more, no less. Here is the first version of you. This version kept waiting for the season, kept telling themselves, once things settle down. The wishing philosophy ran the calendar for 5 straight years. Nothing dramatic happened to this version. No disaster, no single crisis. Just a quiet accumulation of small, skipped actions. One unremarkable day at a time. And now, 5 years later, this version is standing in almost the exact same spot they started in. Except one thing has changed. They're 5 years older, carrying 5 years of fresh evidence for the same old story about why it never quite happened for them. The field looks the same, because nothing was ever planted in it. Now here's the second version of you. Same starting point, same bank account on day 1, same fears, honestly. Because becoming disciplined never requires the fear to disappear first. It only requires you to act while it's still there. This version wrote the harvest down. Chose one honest action, most days, even on the hard days, even when it only amounted to 10 quiet minutes. Protected 30 minutes of self-education, more days than not, for 5 straight years, which is close to 900 hours of becoming more valuable, stacked quietly on top of a life that looked, on any single given day, almost exactly like the first version's life. And now, 5 years later, this version is standing somewhere the first version cannot even see from where they're standing. Not because of one dramatic leap, because of roughly 1,800 ordinary days, compounding, the same way a field compounds a season of honest seed into a harvest too large to carry in your arms. Here is what I want you to notice, because it's the whole point of everything we've covered today. On any single day, chosen at random, out of those 5 years, you could not tell these 2 people apart. Day 47 looks almost identical for both of them. Day 300 barely shows a difference. That's exactly why the wishing philosophy survives as long as it does. Because on any given ordinary Tuesday, discipline doesn't look like it's winning yet. But stack enough of those ordinary Tuesdays in the same direction, and the 2 lives stop being comparable at all. I want you to actually decide, right now, which version of that 5-year future you are, today, building. Because you are building one of them, whether you've admitted that to yourself or not. There is no pause button on time. The calendar moves whether you plant anything in it or not. The version of you who becomes disciplined isn't promised an easy 5 years. I won't stand here and tell you that. There will still be a winter in there somewhere. There always is. But that version walks into every season, including the cold ones, with roots already growing. Because the daily actions never stopped, even when the harvest wasn't visible yet. That's the future available to you. Not guaranteed, available. The field doesn't guarantee anyone a harvest. It only guarantees this. It will return, honestly and generously, whatever you were actually willing to plant. So let's come back to where we started. You keep waiting for the right conditions. I told you, at the very beginning of this, that the season you're waiting for isn't coming, and now you know why. Seasons aren't something you wait for. Seasons are something you walk through, on purpose, planting the whole way, especially through the cold ones. You are not behind. You are not too late. You are not disqualified by your past harvests, because the field does not hold a grudge, and it is offering you fresh ground again today, the same way it does every single morning, to everyone, without exception, whether they use it or not. Discipline is the bridge. You've heard me say that a few times now, and I want it to be the last thing that leaves your mind before you leave this video. Not discipline as punishment. Discipline as the bridge between the person hearing these words right now and the person who, 5 years from today, looks back and doesn't recognize the frightened, waiting version of themselves anymore. And somewhere between now and then, there will be a winter. I promised you honesty at the start of this, so I'll stay honest with you here at the end of it too. There will be a season where the ground looks bare and the effort looks pointless, and the whole philosophy feels like it might be a story you told yourself that didn't hold up. That season is not proof you were wrong. It is simply winter, doing what winter has always done, asking you to keep tending roots you cannot yet see. One more day, on the strength of a spring you have not been shown yet but have every reason to trust, because the law has never once failed an honest farmer in the history of the world. You already know which philosophy you've been living by, wishing or becoming, and underneath whatever excuse feels most comfortable right now, you already know exactly which honest action you're supposed to choose today. So stop asking the world to hand you an easier field. Start becoming the kind of farmer no field can defeat. Plant something today. Not because today guarantees tomorrow's harvest. Nothing does. Not for anyone. Not ever. Plant something today because the field only ever asks one honest question, every single morning of your life. And it is asking you that question again, right now. What are you willing to sow, today, while nobody's applauding? So that someday, not someday vague, but someday specific, someday earned, you get to stand in a harvest you built yourself, and finally stop waiting for a season that was, the whole time, simply waiting for you to start.